Sterling Forest, New York. 18,000 acres of magnificent forest situated on the border of New York and New Jersey. One of the few remnants of the mid-Atlantic forest that dominated this region at the time the founding fathers settled here. The Wallkill River, which flows through Sussex County, New Jersey, an important migratory bird flyway area. Many species of birds and waterfowl use this river corridor as a resting and feeding place on their way to wintering grounds in South America. The Pequannock Watershed. It's 35,000 acres of pristine forests, lakes, and reservoirs owned by the city of Newark to supply residents with quality drinking water. Sterling Forest, the Wallkill River, and the Pequannock Watershed. What do these three areas have in common? They are all parcels of land within a stone's throw of the metropolitan area. They are relatively untouched by development and serve as watersheds, natural filtration systems which purify the water we drink. But a storm has developed over the use of this land. On the one hand, environmentalists want to save these last pockets of open space. These open spaces are key links in the effort to create a greenbelt from the Delaware River to the Hudson River to protect the water and air quality in this densely populated region for future generations to enjoy. Developers, meanwhile, want to build on this land, citing the need for growth in the region in order to prevent existing communities from dying. They say today's technology can provide clean water, so the need for watersheds to naturally protect our water supply is obsolete. Thus, the battle lines are drawn between environmentalists and developers in the fight for pure water, green versus green. The fight to save open space, to protect the air and water quality in the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area is not a new one, but it is a silent war that few know is being fought.
It's been called a quiet crisis, and once we lose the opportunity to preserve a forested area or a wilderness area, it's going to be lost forever. We can't correct that.
Helen Finsky, an environmental activist and former deputy commissioner of the New Jersey State Department of Environmental Protection during the Kane administration, was instrumental many years ago in saving the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge in Morris County from becoming an airport.
And it was then that I found that I was just born a crusader and started crusading. And the bottom line was that we finally, with the help of a lot of people, saved Great Swamp. It became a wildlife refuge, and then it was buffered by 2 county park systems that are wonderful and a couple of nature education centers, and so now thousands of people are enjoying this area that I thought was my little piece of heaven.
Today, Helen Finsky is serving on the Skylands Greenway Task Force. Created by Governor Tom Kane just before leaving office, its mandate is to conduct a study to find out what needs to be done to preserve a greenbelt in this region that extends from the Delaware River in New Jersey to the Hudson River in New York. Environmentalists and public officials from both sides of the New York-New Jersey boundary line serve on the committee. Governor Jim Florio appointed Grace Garisick to chair the task force.
We have to educate our public, we have to educate our public elected officials, and hopefully there'll be one who walks among them, our elected official who has the courage to do what needs to be done, particularly in these times, before we become developing heaven.
You know, incredibly, the great cities of Europe, 200 and 300 years ago, they planned green belts around their cities to contain growth, to make sure that people who lived in congested areas would always have access to open spaces. We never did. But almost by luck, if you take the Skyway areas, you take the Palisades Interstate Parkway, the Harriman State Park, the lands of the Delaware River, it's still possible.
The Skylands Greenway has many beautiful areas, many critical areas, but I think the 3 real gems in the Greenway, the 3 pieces that most individuals focus in on are Sterling Forest, the Pequannock Watershed, and the Wallkill proposed National Wildlife Refuge. They are the 3 gems, and if we can protect the majority of those three areas, then we really will have done something permanent and meaningful for future generations.
But environmentalists are concerned that it's too late to save these three areas because the land is privately owned and communities in this region want to grow. Some plans for development are already on the drawing board. Sterling Forest Corporation has spent millions of dollars over the last 2 years to develop a master plan for the preservation and development of the Sterling Forest community. The Wallkill River, which was recently designated a National Wildlife Refuge, is still threatened because the National Fish and Wildlife Service will only purchase property from willing sellers, and townships in the area want to grow in order to increase their tax base. This means that sewage treatment plants in the area, which discharge into the Wallkill River, will need to expand their operations to accommodate the growing population. So talk of upgrading the river classification to protect the wildlife refuge is creating a lot of opposition from Sussex County residents. The city of Newark owns the Pequannock watershed. Recently, a new treatment plant has been built, and environmentalists worry that Newark might free up some land for development. Plans for a golf course and condominiums have already been discussed with the West Milford Town Council. But when the Town Council tried to rezone Newark's property to allow this type of development, environmentalists spoke out against the rezoning. The battle to save open space is actively being waged on these three fronts. Sterling Forest is the focal point of this fight. Even though Sterling Forest is located in New York, it serves as the watershed for the North Jersey District Water Supply Commission. That means rain falling in Sterling Forest will eventually filter down through streams into the Monksville and Wanacue reservoirs in New Jersey. These two reservoirs provide drinking water for about 25% of the New Jersey population. Now, Sterling Forest Corporation, which owns the property, wants to develop it, and many New Jerseyans fear their water supply will be polluted.
Between Hackensack and ourselves, we supply pretty close to 1.8 million people, and that is approximately 25% of the population of New Jersey. So we're not talking about a small system here. We have concern with the Sterling Forest operation because in the past we've been privileged with a large undeveloped area in Sterling Forest, and there is now potential for that area being developed, which could have an adverse effect on the waters which come down from there and end up in the Wanacue Reservoir.
Originally, Sterling Forest straddled the New York-New Jersey state line with 18,000 acres situated in New York and 2,000 acres located in Passaic County, New Jersey. But when development plans for the area surfaced in 1988, Passaic County freeholders took action to protect their water supply.
Sterling Forest sits right above two very important reservoirs in northern New Jersey. If you build in that area, you obviously are taking away from that filtration process, and you would cause faster runoff and more severe problems. Rather than let that happen, we felt it was in the best interest of the people that live here now and future generations to protect our water supply. So we condemned by eminent domain those 2,000 acres.
Although litigation continues over the price Passaic County will have to pay for the 2,000 acres, Sterling Forest on the New Jersey side of the state line has been saved and will never be developed.
New Jersey is the most populous state in the Union, most densely populated state in the Union. And where is it going to be in 100 years if we keep building and building and building and building and forget that we must have water to survive? So rather than allow any chance of us not having that quality of life, we have made that impossible now.
But the fight didn't stop there. Sterling Forest Corporation continued to move ahead with its planning process to develop the rest of its 18,000 acres in New York.
What we ultimately want to do is achieve a return for the shareholders. There are two ways that we'll do that. One would be an acquisition by some governmental entity. Another would be moving forward to develop the property.
It retained Thomas Cook of Sedway Cook Associates as a consultant to coordinate the planning process because of his work on other environmentally sensitive developments. In the early phases of planning, the corporation adopted 23 principles to provide for environmentally sensitive and economically sound development. These principles addressed a broad range of issues, including wildlife habitats, water supply and quality, fiscal impacts, and quality of life.
I would hate to see this site underutilized. As a planner and as an environmentalist, the position we've always have advanced is that in the areas that you are developing, you should develop those to their fullest potential consistent with all the objectives that you have. Because by doing that, you are taking pressure off of other land. And therefore, we can begin to accommodate our future growth in a much smaller portion of our land supply.
One of the principles cited by the corporation is that it is committed to keep 75% of Sterling Forest in open space.
We can honor our commitment to our shareholders to develop this property in an economically viable way at the same time that we can respect the land and preserve over 75% of the property in open space.
And we would be locating our school facilities, convenience retail facilities.
In June of 1990, Sterling Forest Corporation unveiled 4 proposals for development. One of the plans, which best addressed the corporation's goals, called for about 750,000 square feet of retail space, 6.1 million square feet of commercial space, and 14,500 residential units. The corporation estimated that 15,000 jobs would be created locally. Lou Heimbach, president of Sterling Forest Corporation and Warren County supervisor, is enthusiastic about this plan.
Well, I think development is needed everywhere in order to maintain social and political and economic viability. A community is almost like riding a bicycle. You either move forward or you fall over if you stand still. And in order to maintain the workforce, the jobs, and people's paychecks, and the amenities, which are part of the quality of life, like a good school system, a good government which provides services for people, the recreational amenities. You can't do that in a declining economy. You can only do that in a place that's prosperous and growing.
Folks, we're going to move inside now. If you could ordering.
But many New Jerseyans and New Yorkers are skeptical and believe development will harm the environment.
Would the bears still live there? Would the other wildlife still live there? Would we still have Sterling Forest as we know it, or would we just have another wooded suburb in a metropolitan area that already has hundreds of wooded suburbs and only one Sterling Forest?
This whole area really is a source of drinking water for the people in the state of New Jersey. But besides the water issue, it's just, this is our open space. This is what's left in New Jersey and the New York metropolitan area. You know, we're only 25 miles from heavily developed parts of New Jersey and 40 miles from New York City. And yet we still have a beautiful wilderness that's here that's for us to enjoy. It's still an area where you have habitat for many different animals, from black bear to bald eagles. But more importantly, it's a place where we can get out and hunt and fish, hike, or just breathe. And whatever happens up here is going to impact on the rest of our region. And but most importantly, it's going to impact on our water supply.
Conservation groups and individuals from New Jersey and New York feel so strongly about saving this area, they join together, calling themselves the Sterling Forest Coalition. Its goals are to educate the public on the importance of keeping the forest in its natural state, to talk to the local planning boards responsible for permitting development in the area, and to lobby government on a federal, state, and local level for land acquisition.
And as we look forward to the year 2050 or the year 2100, when the densely populated New York metropolitan area will have extended out into Orange County and even into Sullivan County and beyond, to have this wonderful green area will be something that those generations will be thankful for, much as the foresight of the people in New York City, who saved the much smaller central part as a green oasis in that city, have earned the gratitude of our generation.
About 1990, Sterling Forest Corporation held over 30 public meetings to keep the local New York communities of Tuxedo, Warwick, and Monroe abreast of its planning process. These open forums gave everyone a chance to see what type of development is being planned for Sterling Forest and to raise any issues. And many issues were raised. Degradation of water quality was a major concern. Ella Filippone of the Passaic River Coalition explains the importance of protecting the rivers that flow through Sterling Forest.
If we are going to clean up our waterways, the headwaters, and all of the waters in Sterling Forest are headwaters to something in the Passaic, whether it be the Wenatchee or the Ramapo. If we are to reach the goals, then the headwaters must remain healthy and pure. If they are healthy and pure, and we who in society have really raped the land in the past 50 years, don't degrade it anymore, the river will refurbish itself. It will come back to health. But if we kill off the headwaters, then the river is doomed.
Ringwood Creek and Jennings Brook, which are in Sterling Forest, are a major source of water for the Wanakee Reservoir. The water coming out of Ringwood Creek will not be clean, will not be pristine as it is today. It'll be sewage plant discharge.
Lou Heimbach had this assurance for New Jerseyans concerned about the possible pollution of their water supply.
The potential for polluting their water within their own borders, I'd see there are probably far greater dangers than exist here. We're going to employ the very latest technology, meet the most stringent requirements that are imposed on us, and I think from that standpoint be able to assure them that nothing will happen.
You get road salts, which are used to de-ice the roads. You get fertilizers on the lawns. All of these things contribute to pollution which comes to us, which is known as non-point source pollution, the kind of pollution we really can't collect and treat. The other type of pollution that we would have to contend with is the pollution from the sewage treatment plants that would have to be constructed in the area to take care of the human waste and also any business waste that may be generated up there. These are the kind of things that give us cause for concern in an undeveloped area versus a developed area.
The question of stream and river classifications is a sore point for many environmentalists concerned about the quality of New Jersey's water supply, especially New York's classification of the Ringwood Creek, because although the present quality of the stream is virtually pristine, New York has given its lowest classification. This means that treated sewage could be discharged into the stream on the New York side of the state line without violating its standards.
One of the real problems is that New York State has refused to recognize the pristine quality of that stream. In New Jersey, that stream is a Category 1 stream. It's the highest water quality standards there are. In New York State, it's one of the low quality standards. And what they're allowed to discharge into that stream, you wouldn't even want to swim in, let alone drink.
The streams know no boundaries, especially when we put artificial lines on maps. The only boundaries that the streams know are the watershed boundaries.
And that's the problem. New Jersey is protecting its water supply by not permitting any sewage treatment plant to discharge into the Ringwood Creek. But this sewage treatment plant in Sterling Forest is allowed to discharge. When the stream crosses into New Jersey, it still contains the discharge and violates New Jersey's classification. But because of the state boundary, nobody can be fined.
If people object to that discharge, then they need to be addressing their state legislators, not Sterling Forest Corporation. Because by all the standards that are in place today, they will be met.
Sure, we have all these laws, books, we have all these wonderful machines, but that is really the problem, the high price that we pay when we substitute natural sources of pure drinking water with machines. The machines just can't be relied on. We don't know that the machines will be maintained properly.
To violate the New Jersey standards, which are Category 1 waters, which is the highest classification New Jersey has, is going to be very critical to us. It will cost New Jersey more money to treat the water if the standards in New York are not high. We would like to see a comparable classification as has been established for New York and Connecticut.
The streams which flow from New York into Connecticut's reservoirs have been classified Class AA special, which means that no sewage can be put into the streams that flow from New York into Connecticut's reservoirs. And we don't see why a similar arrangement shouldn't be made for New Jersey.
We are very concerned about the water quality, and we are committed that the water quality will meet the stream standards of New Jersey when the water goes into New Jersey.
I'm on my town's planning board in Ringwood, and when people come in, they will promise you everything in the world. They say it won't degrade the environment, it won't impact on traffic, it won't impact on streams. But when you get all done with it, if those densities are greater than what your land can handle, it will.
Annette Dorozinski, the town supervisor of Tuxedo, New York, is following the planning process closely. She admits the town has been slowly declining over the years through lack of growth.
We lost our hospital, our church, one of the churches closed down, our school is, the enrollment has gone down tremendously. Well, you want to see development, you want a healthy town, you need people. You know, misery maybe likes company. If we're going to have to pay taxes and suffer and not have the services that we're entitled to have as a viable to keep this town alive, then I would much prefer suffering with the people than to suffer with trees that aren't going to bring us any in.
That's because the town of Tuxedo is surrounded by state parks, which don't pay property taxes to the township. But some locals say the chase for tax ratables through development is unrealistic.
I've seen Rockland County get populated. I've seen Bergen County get populated. Through all this development, I have yet to see taxes go down as a result of it. They really have to show this to me. To me, it's impossible. It has not been done yet, to my knowledge, in this area.
Betty Quick of Warwick, New York, a Sierra Club and Sterling Forest Coalition member, wrote this commentary on tax ratables for the Warwick Valley Dispatch. In it, she explains that not all tax ratables are created equal because residential development depletes a town's tax base.
Sure, they pay taxes, and they take more in services than they pay in taxes. And there are still some people, it's a kind of magical thinking, yeah, we need ratables, we need development, not stopping to think that it's going to cost the town more when you balance it than they'll be getting in taxes.
The concern of our local communities that we will have a balance between jobs and housing, or between the commercial development and the residential development, is one of their paramount concerns. And the way that we ensure that this happens is with what's called a phasing program. We will develop a schedule where we will get to do so many houses, and then we have to do so much commercial, say phase 1. We'll have certain targets. If we don't achieve those targets, we don't get to move to phase 2.
Whether they build it in Tuxedo or they build it in Warwick, we're going to get killed with traffic.
But Sterling Forest Corporation says its objective to have 50% of the residents live and work in the area will solve this problem.
Even though we have more homes, more people, we actually are creating fewer auto trips on those major and critical road segments.
But as the Tuxedo Town supervisor said at one of the public meetings, traffic in the area has already reached the saturation point.
We're the guardians of the traffic, so no matter what happens to Sterling Forest, it should be noted that we're still stuck with the traffic because the towns that border us have all built up.
If it be possible.
So we know what it is with the actual hours, which are not a true reflection of those at all.
Okay, well, there was no intent to suggest that these were the only peak hours.
Yeah, but I would think it would skew the whole report because it's not proper.
Okay.
We have more traffic than you're reflecting in these reports. You're dealing with human nature, and you can't put people in boxes. And I think that's what they're finding out. There's no guarantee that people are going to work in their community.
Sterling Forest Corporation has spent millions of dollars to develop a master plan for its property and to educate the public. Yet many environmentalists are suspicious about Sterling Forest Corporation's intentions because it was a subsidiary of Ambase Incorporated. Ambase's president and chief executive officer, Marshall Manley, resigned in March of 1990 after news had surfaced of speculative deals with a bankrupt Drexel Burnham Bear. Ambase's stock price fell, and the corporation wanted a restructure. Manley also resigned from the board of directors of General Development Corporation, which was in the news for pleading guilty to federal indictments for systematic overpricing and fraudulent housing appraisals. Manley's resignation caused a flurry of bad publicity for Sterling Forest Corporation.
And when you hear about dealings where the chairman of the board is no longer chairman of the board because of some kind of violations of financial laws and security acts, and you hear about a bank that is leading foreclosures for a profit, it makes you wonder just what type of organization are we about to do business with.
Another blow to Sterling Forest Corporation's image during the earlier planning process was that it seemed to minimize its impact on New Jersey's water supply. The corporation claimed Sterling Forest accounted only for 3% of the Passaic River Basin's water volume. In an editorial in the New York Times, Thomas Cook of Sterling Forest Corporation stressed the percentage is a quantity far less than some would have the public believe.
Well, that's true as far as the entire Passaic River Basin is concerned. However, it makes up a much larger percentage of the water that comes into the Wanakee Reservoir. We have a total watershed of 94 square miles and a watershed at the Ringwood Creek, which drains Sterling Forest, of about 19 square miles. So that's roughly 20% of the water which flows naturally into this reservoir comes from Sterling Forest.
The federal government started to take an interest in Sterling Forest back in October 1989 when Pennsylvania Congressman Peter Kosmeier held an open space hearing. After that hearing, Kosmeier introduced a bill into Congress authorizing the National Forest Service to conduct an independent study on the effects development will have on the region. New Jersey Congressman Robert Torricelli co-sponsored the bill.
The appropriate level of development of the Sterling Forest is nothing. We do not have shortages of shopping centers. We do not have shortages of office space in northern New Jersey or in New York. There simply isn't a need for expanding development into that region. Any further development we need can be within cities that already exist, in towns that are already created. The one thing we have a shortage of is virgin forests. That's what shouldn't be lost.
New York Congressman Benjamin Gilman did not see eye to eye with his New Jersey counterpart on both development and the need for an independent study.
We have to make certain that if there's any growth in the area, that it's balanced growth, that we protect the resources, the natural resources, as much as possible. But at the same time, let's not stymie any growth. I've suggested, let's wait till we conduct the hearings are completed, the Sedway Cook plan is completed, and if then we're not satisfied, our environmental people and municipal officials are not satisfied, that's time enough then to conduct an independent study.
I am not dissuaded from a federal study by it being argued that the developers are doing the environmental studies. If ever there were a classic case of the fox guarding the chicken coop, this would be it.
You have a problem with the analysis, or you see a flaw, you see something that hasn't been addressed, let us know, because we want to find out about it now, not after when we're going before one of the town boards with a permit for approval.
Mr. Cook may be the finest environmental planner in the world, but he is taking his orders from the developer. The developer has his agenda, and I don't argue with whatever his agenda may be. He wants to make money. That's what he has to do. So he is not looking out for the interests of the general public.
All the cookies seem to be in the one basket. I think if it's the area's last forest, it deserves a second opinion, just as anybody with a medical problem would do.
And our hope is that with the study completed, we can convince both the state of New York and the federal government to begin acquiring some of the land to prevent any development.
Hopes were raised in 1990 for those who wanted to see the land acquired by the state of New York when Governor Cuomo put the 21st Century Environmental Bond Act on the November ballot. The Bond Act would authorize the state to borrow nearly $2 billion for its environmental programs.
Historically, bond acts for this purpose have always been voted in. And So I anticipate that that will pass.
But when the voters turned out, the Bond Act was defeated.
Well, our Environmental Quality Bond Act was defeated. It was defeated by a margin of 51 to 49%. It was close, but there was a low turnout this year, and I believe that the general sentiment was concerned for the fiscal health of the state of New York, and that the combination of concern for the economy and the small turnout ultimately defeated it.
Well, the failure of the Environmental Bond Act in November's election removed, at least for the time being, any viable possibility that there would be a government acquisition of substantial portions of the forest.
And there are some who prefer it that way.
We've been surrounded by forest. Is it beautiful? Yes, it's beautiful. Are we happy we have it? Some of it. Some of us now, we detest it for the simple reason it's costing us money for everybody else to use it. And we're going to be taxed twice. I've said this over and over. We're going to be taxed to the state because they take it off the tax roll. We get taxed to maintain them, and they're not doing a good job of them. And I can understand. They just don't have the monies to do it.
Well, there is a strain in managing state and federal properties today, but we are left with the reality that if the acquisition is not made now and the land preserved in our generation, it simply can't be recreated in the future. We can't wait to decide to buy this land when our own fiscal burdens ease, and we have the money to better manage, because the land won't be available.
To add to the uncertainty of the future of Sterling Forest, Ambase Incorporated has sold Sterling Forest Corporation to TVH Acquisition Group, a Scandinavian conglomerate. Will the new owners mean a change in development plans?
A new owner could come in and take a look at what we're doing and determine they wanted to make a change, but what they would have to decide to do would be to throw over millions of dollars of work and a substantial number of commitments that have been made. For example, our commitment to keep over 75% of the property in permanently preserved open space. A new owner would have a very difficult time coming in and reneging on that commitment.
With all the attention Sterling Forest is generating over the fight for pure water, green versus green, environmentalists have extended their fight to other areas, including the Wallkill River Valley and the Pequannock watershed. They would like to create a greenbelt, Delaware to the Hudson rivers, to protect the water and air quality. Sterling Forest, the Wallkill River Valley, and the Pequannock watershed are vital links in this greenway concept.
And so now that the spotlight is on this development, perhaps others who are concerned with proper land use development, that are concerned with the greater picture in the New York, New Jersey area will take interest.
During her tenure as Deputy Commissioner of the New Jersey State Department of Environmental Protection, Helen Finsky was working on a map to show all the public lands on the New York-New Jersey boundary. That's when she discovered there were only 2 areas of land not owned by the public.
And the 2 holes were Sterling Forest and an area that we call the headwaters of the river. So we went to work to find out how we could save the Wallkill while we were working on the Sterling Forest.
She contacted the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which then conducted studies of the Wallkill River Valley in Sussex County. In January 1990, the service proposed that this area would make an excellent national wildlife refuge.
It happens to be in a location strategically where it's between 2 major flyways, the Delaware River Flyway and the Hudson River. So there's a lot of spillover of migratory birds into that area.
The Wallkill River flows into New York and is the watershed for some of the richest agricultural land in the state. Ironically, the classification for the river has a low grade, allows sewage treatment discharge. Yet when it crosses the New York border, it has a high classification, just the reverse of the Ringwood Creek. The hope of environmentalists was that New Jersey would protect New York's watershed by establishing a wildlife refuge in the Wallkill River Valley, and New York would reciprocate by upgrading the Ringwood Creek. But it hasn't turned out that way. Many New Jerseyans who live in Sussex County don't want the Wallkill River upgraded because they want to attract new businesses and more people to the area to increase their tax base. Upgrading the river classification would prevent them from expanding their sewage treatment plants to accommodate growth. Senator Robert Littell of Sussex County was for the wildlife refuge, but he had 2 concerns.
One was condemnation. That's been resolved. The other issue was the the ability of the Sussex County Municipal Utilities Authority to apply for a permit to expand in the future if the river was reclassified to a Class 1 river. We want to protect the water quality. What we don't want to do is shut us out completely, because that leaves the alternative of putting it in the ground. If a wastewater treatment plant puts its effluent into the ground and it malfunctions, when it malfunctions, what's not being treated then goes into the ground. If it goes into the ground, it's going to stay there. If it goes into the river, it at least washes away.
From the beginning of humankind until 100 years ago, dilution was the solution to pollution, because there was plenty of place for dilution, and there were very few people who were creating the pollution. So that worked. But in the last 100 years, the world has changed, and the wilderness, instead of being the dominant thing with pockets of civilization, now we have civilized, human-affected environment with pockets of wilderness. And there's no way to dilute with natural resources the pollution that we're creating.
Well, the Wallkill River right now is under stress. It receives discharge from sewage treatment plants, at least probably 4 or 5 of them.
I think New Jersey should upgrade the water classification not only in the Wallkill but in the streams entering other wildlife refuges as a method of protecting those wildlife refuges. It doesn't make a great deal of sense to spend the money acquiring wildlife refuge as quality open space and then on the other hand not ensure superior water quality.
There's approximately 85 landowners that will be affected under the land acquisition program here for the refuge, and it will involve approximately 7,500 acres in 3 townships, and approximately 4,300 acres is wetland and 3,200 acres uplands, consisting of farmland primarily and wooded forest.
Originally, when Mr. Gibb Chase came up and spoke to me about the purchase of my property, it was the lower section, maybe 1,000 feet in from the river, and then when the final study was done, it encompassed both my farms right up to the road, okay, which I was not too happy with.
The refuge proposal includes a proposal of some 3,000 acres or more of buffer lands in addition to wetlands. And the buffer lands are designed to ensure the preservation of the water quality from such impacts as non-point source pollution, siltation, runoff from roads, and that kind of thing. Wallkill National Wildlife Refuge would mean a very, very desirable piece of quality open space preserved in perpetuity. As excellent wildlife habitat, as excellent free flood control, and as an insurance in protecting water quality in both New Jersey and New York. We need to be concerned about the region, not only the local area.
The fiscal 1991 budget has just been passed, and we have been very fortunate to receive funding for the Wallkill in the amount of $4 million. So that's at least an initial startup funding. We have 28 to 30 willing sellers right now.
I would have to say I'm an unwilling seller at this time. I do not trust the federal government because my own opinion is they tell you one thing and they do something else. An example of this is Tox Island. The federal government started purchasing property to make a similar refuge area and watershed, and it never transpired. And it's not because so much of the individuals that are there now or the forest rangers that are taking care of the area. Because of budget cuts, because of appropriations, they can't take care of what they have. Environmentalists, I'm all for it. But come on, we can't take care of what we have. You go up to Tox Island and it's a disgrace.
One of the frustrations that we have as a conservation organization is that quite often one of the first things to get cut in budget crisis time is the money to maintain and protect our parks. and park closures and disrepair is a frustration and an obstacle to acquiring new land. We would like to see in this state a permanent and stable source of funding for maintenance of our parks, and I think any acquisition plans in the future should consider permanent funding.
I think that in New Jersey we have a unique situation compared with the rest of the nation. We have areas that are extremely worthy of preservation, which are within a reasonable distance of millions of people. We have, for instance, some of the fine areas in the Highlands, like the Pequannock watersheds, which are 35 or 40 minutes from population areas.
The city of Newark, around the turn of the century, acquired all the lands around their water supply. They were very farsighted, and they knew that clean drinking water back then was something that wasn't going to be around forever, and they protected their own water supply. The problem is now that with technology, man has learned to pollute and clean up. So the water protection value of that land is not as important to Newark as it used to be. They have a new treatment plant. And so it is possible now for them to develop in the water supply and get a return on that money. We would like to see the city of Newark not be under the financial pressure to develop that land. Their watershed and their good stewardship has provided a tremendous resource to the citizens of New Jersey.
But so far, the city of Newark has not been granted any tax easements.
We pay to the various townships that we have property in the Pequannock watershed approximately $2 million a year. The corporation over the years has found that it could propose some responsible development plans to the various towns that we own land in.
But Dennis Miranda is fighting to stop development in the watershed. He comes from Pagoda, New Jersey. A few years ago, he discovered the Pequannock watershed and became an avid bird watcher. Today, he's chairman of Watershed Watch, an organization dedicated to educating the public on the need to preserve this wilderness area.
We realize that ourselves alone could not protect this place, but we may very well be the stopgap measure that keeps things intact for as long as possible until the greater forces, the political will, and whatever momentum can be created to preserve this area. I think Newark, if they were to consider protecting their water quality, I think they'd want to consider how much of an impact a dramatic increase in populace will cause or will do to their particular watershed. Even though their argument may very well be that it's outside of their drainage basin, these people are not fixed. They will move around the watershed. There's already a very important problem with garbage, human disturbance, human trespassing going on in the watershed. You increase the population up here, you're going to exacerbate an already worsening problem.
For several years, the city of Newark wanted to build a golf course on a 1,000-acre tract of land in the Pequannock watershed and was negotiating with the town council of West Milford to rezone the area from an R4 zone, which means one unit may be built on 4 acres of land, to an RR zone.
RR is a residential recreational zone. The concept being that the majority of the property will be used with some recreational use, such as a golf course, and that there can be ancillary housing associated with that.
But at a public hearing on April 14, 1990, Dennis Miranda and other environmental representatives spoke up against the rezoning.
If the R&R designation had been left intact in the master plan, it would have allowed or permitted Newark to come in and look for permits which was consistent with the master plan designation. We didn't want them to have an invitation to do what they wanted to on that particular piece of property.
At present, the residential recreation zone ordinance is being rewritten and will be introduced again at a later date. So Dennis Miranda and Watershed Watch are keeping vigilant.
As far as the future of Watershed Watch is concerned, we will remain as the watchdog mechanism on the Newark watershed.
However, Watershed Watch does more than attend public hearings to thwart development plans. It also cares enough about the Pequannock watershed to organize a cleanup day.
open space, as viewed by the environmentalist, is a natural area, undisturbed, a wilderness area, untrampled, where an ecosystem or a food chain is intact, where all the animals and all the plants that you expect to find are there. You don't expect to find styrofoam cups. You don't expect to find plastic bags. You don't expect to find remnants of human disturbance. We picked up over 100 bags of garbage. Garbage has been collecting for years, garbage that would remain there had we not done so. And what we do is try and set an example that the open space is not an area where you dump garbage in. And we can clean it up, and perhaps our example will make someone think twice before they throw something else out the window in an area where no one lives at. Businesses that have refuse have a problem if they can't afford to liquidate it. So what do? You dump it somewhere where there's an open space.
Solid waste management is, as you know, terrible. The legal disposal fees are very high. Unfortunately, the way that the laws read right now, the fines are not as high as the legal disposal fees, the tipping fees. So that's one problem. The ability for any agency to monitor a 35,000 acre piece of property is difficult. We're isolated. We have a large land mass with a large circumference, and we tend to get dumped on by unscrupulous people.
Presently, the local townships are working with the Newark Watershed Management to increase the penalty fees for dumping.
So once that fee gets raised and it's somewhat in balance with the cost of legal disposal, when that starts balancing out, I think you'll see some decrease in dumping.
The Newark Watershed Conservation and Development Corporation issues about 5,000 permits a year for recreational purposes, such as hunting, fishing, and hiking, but says that Newark residents who pay taxes on this land underutilize its resources. The corporation and the City of Newark Recreational Division are trying to change that.
We have a very active summer program for Newark youngsters who go to what is called Camp Watershed.
Go ahead, Jeffy. Don't move until you're comfortable. Wait a minute. There you go. Hold on. Hold on. All right. There you go, girl.
Well, it's good that they own this because most kids can't run around in Newark since there's not enough room with the cars and all that. So they come here to Camp Watershed.
They should keep the country like this here because there's not too many places like this. The rest of the place is all city-like, and there's not other places where you could just go out and relax.
New Jersey is a state that is developed in an advanced stage. Do we permit the forces that be to develop this as we've seen the entire state develop? Or does it come a time that perhaps we've gone too far? The issue of water quality is intertwined to the issue of this open space that we have here.
Environmentalists are often called alarmists. We were called alarmists when we pointed out that we were losing birds to DDT. We were called alarmists when we said that our waters weren't going to be safe to drink. We're called alarmists now when we say that there's not enough open space. I think the problem is if you don't listen to the environmentalists or the alarmists, it's going to be too late.
The environmentalist and alarmist, looking at the past development patterns in this region, may offer some clues.
I know it's hard to visualize, but this tri-state region is approximately 13,000 square miles. Between 1970 and 1986, roughly 1,000 square miles of land were urbanized, put into urban development. At the same time, there was virtually no increase in population. There was a decline and an increase. And it therefore doesn't take much of a leap of the questioning mind to say, what the heck did we do that for? Why did we screw up another 1,000 square miles of land for no real increase in population? Why did that happen?
As a conservation organization, we'd like to see the development going back into the inner cities and filling in some of the areas that have already been developed. We'd like not to see, and we hope that state planning will provide that we don't continue the suburban sprawl and the fragmentation of our forests and our open space.
But some people who live in rural areas say they are being penalized because of poor development planning in the past.
The road structure is becoming critical up here, and I feel that the people of Wantage, as well as the rest of Sussex County, are really being penalized because the politicians and certain environmental groups are going off the deep end, per se, to say, hey, we have to stop all development.
Once you open up a forest with a road or with a power line, you have human intrusion, you have motorbikes, you have dumping, you have suburbanization of that area.
That concept of no growth in this area has been around for quite a while. There are people who think that we ought to just plug and sit here in the darkness and not have any growth.
What worries some environmentalists, though, is that roads and highways, like the extension to Interstate Highway 287, are still being constructed in this region.
This means that 287 will be able to get people into New York, into Newark, into the urbanized area. And it will be fast become a bedroom community, as is most of the rest of New Jersey. The difficulty with that is that we're going to lose the water supply. That northern part of the state represents good water supply. And frankly, I think it's a tragedy that we're not thinking more seriously about it and about the future of those water supplies.
The fight to protect the water and air quality in northern New Jersey's densely populated urban areas is ongoing.
And we need to be able to convince both states that drinking water, water quality, environmental values cross state lines. And that's why we're hoping with the governor's task force with representation from both states that we can start making environmental decisions that aren't based on political boundaries but are based on science.
The governor's Skylands Greenway Task Force is sharing information with the National Forest Service, which has started its federal study of the area. The Florio administration supports buying land and recognizes that it should take advantage of the depressed real estate market to purchase land while the opportunity exists. According to the New Jersey State Department of Environmental Protection, $80 million in bond money is available for land acquisition. And when the governor's task force has identified the most environmentally sensitive open spaces in the Skylands region, efforts will then be made to raise even more money to acquire that land.
One issue at a time.
I personally want to make sure that that study is not a shelf trophy, that study is used, and that the opportunity that we have now, the opportunity that Governor Kane and Governor Florio recognized when they appointed the task force to preserve for future generations a wilderness area, a national park-like setting, an hour from possibly 10 million people. I want to make sure that that happens.
The New Jersey State Department of Environmental Protection and the City of Newark are looking into ways to provide tax easements in exchange for development rights as a means of preserving the Pequannock watershed.
And with the previous Commissioner of DEP and their staff, we've had a number of conversations and continue to have dialogue. As a matter of fact, we're reaching out now to introduce ourselves and introduce the Watershed Corporation to the new commissioner.
Although the Wallkill River Valley is designated a national wildlife refuge, it will take many years to raise money to purchase the land from willing sellers, and the debate over the need to upgrade the river classification is unresolved. This means sewage treatment plants can continue to discharge treated sewage into the Wallkill River, a fact that concerns environmentalists.
If water quality becomes degraded over time, the costs of improving it at that point can be very high. So I think that this may be an issue of short-run versus long-run views, and that in the long run, the cost of upgrading may be beneficial.
The new owner of Sterling Forest, TVH Acquisition Group, has not announced any policy changes yet, and Sterling Forest Corporation is expected to unveil its development plan for Sterling Forest by the end of March 1991. Meanwhile, environmentalists are working together to find other sources of funds to purchase the property.
And it's all kinds of groups on both sides of the state line that are joining in coalitions to try and save this land.
So the battle between environmentalists and developers, the sometimes silent battle over the fate of the forest, rages on.
I'm very optimistic that because of the open, consultative nature of our process, that whatever the preferred plan looks like, we'll be able to achieve approvals on a large part of it.
You know, there's a saying, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And this area is fine the way it is. It's going to really change the whole character of this area if Sterling Forest is developed.